Hello everyone, Amer back again with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm doing Season 4, Episode 7, which is called Submarine. So Jim goes to a warehouse office for this episode's instructions. The mission: Kruger Stellman is a Nazi war criminal who's about to be released from jail, and he knows where a massive amount of stolen money from the war is being kept. The IMF must get him to reveal the information. We get the basic dossiers this time, just for introducing us to the guests, basically, and that includes returning Tracy from the numbers game and the Hartford Repertory for extra manpower. Off we head to the Eastern European Republic, which I guess is supposed to totally not be East Germany, where Colonel Sardner has been trying to get Stellman's information for years, questioning him every night in what has become nothing more than a futile exercise. They're even sharing drinks. It's basically just a job. They're just going through the motions. Sardner tells Stellman he still has a couple of days left in his sentence and will likely be shot the minute he's released to prevent him from contacting his old Nazi buddies. But Stellman doesn't care and says he'll go to the grave with his oath to the SS, and even Sardner's offer of a luxurious share of the ill-gotten funds means absolutely nothing to him. Stellman gets into the car, which will return him to his prison as part of a motorcade. Willie watches from a rooftop along the route, signaling the IMF members as the cars come around through one street that they must go through. In an ingenious sequence, Paris, as a monk, pulls out in front of Stellman's car with his boxes of cheese falling off his truck, as Jim, as a monk, pulls out in front of the rear car with his boxes of cheese falling out of the truck. Tracy fires a shot with anesthetic gas into Stellman's car as the officers in both the front and the rear talk to each other about the cheese truck on either side. In the confusion, the guys from the repertory get the officers out of Stellman's car and into the IMF van. Jim and Paris also dash away from the scene and into the van, and Tracy pulls Stellman's car into their warehouse. By that time, the captain in the front checks in with the captain in the rear about the prisoner, and they suddenly realize that neither one of them has eyes on Stellman. Barney misleads the officers about where Stellman's car went, and the IMF hightails it out of the van and into the warehouse. Officer Raskov later finds his officers tied up in the IMF van, and Sardner arrives on the scene, realizing that the plan was very, very meticulous, and orders a cordoned search of the area, telling Raskov that their continued existence depends on getting their prisoner back. Stellman wakes up in unfamiliar surroundings on a bunk bed, finding old woman Tracy in the lower bunk ranting incoherently as though recounting an interrogation by Sardner. He opens the door and realizes he's on a submarine. Captain Jim greets him without any fanfare and refuses to answer his questions about where they're going or how they got there. Stellman tries to talk to crewman Willie, who completely ignores him, and then finds himself face-to-face with SS officer Paris, who hints that they are going to SS headquarters. Jim breaks up the conversation and orders Stellman back to the bunk room. Meanwhile, Sardner and Raskov continue to tighten their cordon. Paris enters the bunk room to question Tracy, and Stellman tries to get some more information out of him. Jim breaks things up again and says that Tracy is dead, telling the crew to prepare a torpedo tube to get rid of her, despite Stellman's protest that she's still breathing. Nevertheless, Tracy is nonchalantly ejected to avoid any trouble on the submarine and joins Barney at the IMF control desk outside the apparatus the IMF has constructed to simulate the submarine. Paris allows Stellman to grab his gun, demanding answers. First, he demands to see Paris's SS tattoo, which he is able to show him, explaining that the rest of the crew are regular Navy, assigned to take Stellman and the recently ejected Tracy to neutral Scandinavia, where SS headquarters is located. Sweden, I guess. Tracy was broken by the very capable Sardner and gave up her information. Suddenly, a worried Stellman realizes he's also suspected of being broken as well. But Stellman suddenly realizes he has nothing to worry about. He never cracked. The funds are still in a numbered Swiss account. Yeah, let's go to SS headquarters and I'll totally prove my innocence, he says. After a few minutes, sirens sound, signaling enemy ships in the area. Jim conveniently allows Stellman to have a quick look through the periscope, where he sees an enemy ship in the distance thanks to an IMF projection screen, and shots are heard in the distance. Jim tells Stellman that Sardner has sent forces to chase after them, and the IMF simulates the sub diving down to the ocean floor to avoid detection and wait until the coast is clear. Depth charges are heard, exploding dangerously close to the sub, with the IMF playing with the lights and other effects to simulate minor hits. Jim orders crewman Willie to head out of the control room to help, as the sound of destroyer engines continue to be heard. Jim tells Paris and Shellman that their only chance is to try and convince the enemy destroyer that they've already been hit, so whatever can be spared starts being ejected, including Paris, who Jim smacks on the back to push him into the ejection tube. The cordon comes within a half mile of where it started, and Sardner realizes they must be dealing with foreign intelligence, who's clearly trying to misdirect them, and figures that they're probably right near where the abduction happened, in the nearby warehouse. Jim tells Shellman that the sub is too damaged to move at this point, and gives him equipment to swim up to the surface, if he can make it at his advanced age. Shellman tells Jim that he needs him to take the info to SS headquarters in case he doesn't make it, to prove he never cracked. Jim acts completely disinterested as he puts himself in the ejection tube and prepares to head out, as Shellman starts screaming the Zurich bank number at him, and the IMF makes a hasty exit with Jim starting up a tape with sounds of gunfire. Sheldon puts himself in the tube as Sardner and his men arrive. Jim, Willie, and Paris, dressed as officers, simulate Paris getting shot, so Sardner orders them to take Paris away in the waiting military van, essentially allowing the IMF to escape as his men head into the warehouse and see their elaborate setup. Shellman emerges from the tube, discovering the warehouse, finding Sardner looking at him from below, and sarcastically congratulates him on getting the information he wanted, which leads to Sardner having a massive laughing fit at the absurdity of the situation. Mission accomplished. I actually took a trope and a bit of a confidence boost from a key point in this episode, believe it or not. I went into it saying to myself, well, you know what? I absolutely adore this episode. I know I'm not going to find any flaw in it. Why don't I just put an automatic S for superb on it? And let's just leave it at that because, you know, of course, it's one of the best episodes of Mission Impossible ever. Then I started to think about it a little bit because I said, okay, if it's so easy for me to give this an S for superb, then it should be really, really, really easy to explain why, right? And I ended up having a little bit of trouble doing that, kind of looking through how I could justify it. And then I did it. And then I realized, just like Kruger Shellman in this episode, at one point is just like, oh my gosh, I'm in real trouble here. Then realizes, wait a minute, no, this is exactly what I wanted. And figured out that, you know what, this is great. Come on, yeah, let's do this. So I'm here to kind of tell you exactly why I'm going to give this an S for superb. And I know that there are going to be some disagreements, but I'm going to take you through my own steps and my own thought process. So here we go. First of all, I'm going to say this. This episode is really all about the story. The story that the writers have written and the screenplay that the producers and directors have given us. In most episodes, I talk about the actors and how good they are, and the characters and how good they are. And that is definitely the case here, okay? Stephen McNally, who plays Shellman, and Ramon Bieri, who plays Sardner, are great actors. Their characters are really, really good. But it's not really even so much about them. It's not even really about the IMF. It's not about Peter Graves. It's not about Leonard Nimoy or Lee Merriweather or anybody else. I don't mean to leave anybody out. Greg Morris, Peter Lupas. I'll just mention everybody. It's not about them. This one is really about the story. And I think that's what I really, really love about it. The abduction of Shellman is done so excellently. It's just one of the best moments in the show, in my opinion. How they're able to fool, the cars in front and the cars in back by setting up the same thing on both sides, and both sides think, oh well, they've got an eye on him, and the other people think, oh well, those guys have an eye on him, and they're telling each other the same story. Fantastically done. The simulation of the submarine, also absolutely excellent. I buy it completely the whole way. I've already mentioned about the actors and the characters, but really it is the story, the plan, and the way that it unfolds that really, really makes this. For me, it's a perfect IMF premise. This is really an impossible mission. This target is impossible to break. There is nothing that you can offer him or do to him that will get him to give up the information that he knows. They've already tried. He's been in an Eastern European republic, in the real world that would be like an Eastern prison for 25 years. He hasn't given it up. He's been tortured, obviously. He's been sleep deprived, food deprived, whatever. It's all already been done. You can't do it. Jim Phelps, find a way. And he does. My day job basically consists of me trying to figure out solutions to problems, right? What is a way that we can actually get this done? And I know it may sound hokey, but I honestly think about this episode sometimes when somebody tells me, no, you can't do this. This is impossible. Well, you know what? Figure out the 1 in a million circumstance that would get somebody to do something that they would ordinarily never, ever, ever do. And then work backwards and fill in the blanks. And that is what this episode is about. And that's another reason why I personally love it so much. I think if you look at it in that way, hopefully you'll see what I mean about it. I went back and I looked at other episodes which were very, very, very similar, because I'm sure that others will probably think about it the same way. I went back and I found 3 in particular. I couldn't really find any others. That you have to get information out of somebody and it just seems impossible. The most recent one was the numbers game from a few episodes ago, right? One thing that all of those episodes have in common is that the IMF has to create a big store, meaning that they have to put their mark, the person who has the information, into their own environment that they can control. That's what we call the big store, right? In the numbers game, well, that was slightly different, I suppose. In that one, they put the mark in his own home, basically, but what they did is they changed the circumstances. They did the whole end of the world thing, and you're dying. So you have to give us this information, or else you are going to die because you're not going to get the penicillin that you need. That's a big difference. And as I talk it out, I think you're going to hopefully see what I mean. I hope I'm going to explain it properly. Before that, not very long ago, at the end of season 3, there was the episode called The Interrogator. Similar idea. You had a guy who was he was a former interrogator. He knows all the techniques. He's never going to give up the information that he knows about how there's going to be a nuclear attack on the United States. So what they do, they put him in a big store and they use psychological displacement in order to put him in circumstances where he feels like, oh my God, I have to give up the information that I know, or I have to remember it and spit it out, because otherwise I'm going to die. Same thing. Similar idea. And the big one, you have to go right back almost to the beginning, to season 1 in Operation Rogosh. And in that episode, I gave it an A+. And I recall now that I didn't actually fully explain why. And I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to rectify that. That one took a big store, the first time we actually saw it, and also a time displacement. They put the mark and they said, you're 2 years into the future. right? And now you're under trial because we think that you're a double agent. You didn't complete your mission properly or whatever. And he has to prove, no, I did complete it properly. And in order to do so, he has to give them the information all about the mission. In that one, I should have mentioned, I'm going to try and go back and rectify this, that the only flaw was, Rogosh was prepared completely to give up the information in order to save his life and to prove that he wasn't a traitor. At the end, the IMF actually literally had to threaten him with the bacterial cultures that he had put around Los Angeles in order for him to finally give up the last bit of information. And that was a little bit of a flaw in that episode, I felt. Anyway, in all three of those episodes, what they basically had to do, the IMF had to do, was to take their mark and take him away from the goal that he wanted to achieve. They did in this one. I feel that the really unique aspect of this is the IMF didn't really even have to play any games with their mark. They didn't have to take him away from the familiar circumstances. They didn't have to take him away from a certain time period or from his own mind, like in the interrogator. In this one, you could almost say that Stellman is being given pennies from heaven. He's being given exactly what he wants. This is the best thing he could have hoped for, that his Nazi buddies would rescue him before he was going to be released from jail and exposed to the world, and they were going to take him to SS headquarters. What more could the guy possibly ask for? As a matter of fact, that's the only thing the guy is asking for. It's the only thing he could possibly want. As Jim Phelps says at the beginning of the episode, if I'm wrong about Stellman's motivations, our plan isn't going to work. So that's how I feel. That's why and how I feel that this episode is the best one out there in terms of getting information that the mark doesn't want to reveal. Because in this one, the IMF is like, no problem. We'll play your game, buddy, and let's see how it goes. Okay? And I can understand how and why other people might disagree, because I just went through it all, right? You can feel that this episode is, it's a rehash of old episodes. It's a rehash of Rogosh, and it's a rehash of this one and this one. Okay, yes, it does take certain tropes and certain techniques and certain circumstances from all of those episodes. Okay? And for a while, even I struggled with coming up with a solid, objective, not subjective reason why this episode is better. But I really do feel that the reason that I just outlined, that here what we're doing is we're not going against the mark's internal motivations. We're going right with it, and he's going to lead us right to where we want to go. That is why I'm going to stick with my grade of S for this one. I watched this episode, and I'm still really compelled by it. Just watching the action unfold. I am engrossed in the story, and I want to watch this episode again. I could watch it again, even though I watched it actually it was last night. I'm recording this the next day. I could watch it again, and I would still be interested in watching the story unfold. And that's why I give this episode a grade of S. There are not many things that I can watch again and that I've already watched before, and I know what's going to happen in the story, and I'm still compelled by it. When you see that, that's when you know you've got great TV, right? There are certain series. Breaking Bad happens to be one of them for me. Better Call Saul happens to be one of those for me. The Sopranos in the early season also had that level of storytelling. I feel it's kind of rare. There have been a few episodes of Mission that I've given an S2 before that I can watch again, and and it's just magic watching the story unfold. We've already talked about those. There were 3 of them from season 3, and this is the 4th one. As I said, I walked through it. I started, doing a little bit of a write-up thinking, you know what, I'm going to give this an A+. I'm going to have to change my mind because I won't be able to explain it. But as I said, I had that aha moment, just like Kruger Stellman did in this episode, and I said, no, darn it, I know why now. I'm going to give this an S. I'm not afraid of what's happening anymore. And you know what? I don't know what else to say except let that be the cherry on top of my review of this episode. Thank you for watching. I hope what I said makes sense. Whether you agree or you disagree, I hope everybody can agree that this is really an enjoyable episode. And even if you don't think it's maybe among the elite episodes, it's certainly one of the best, just in terms of the story and the premise. I feel it's basically one of the practically flawless. And I don't think I'm going to get too much in terms of disagreement, that it's definitely among the best. Thank you for watching. Please like this episode. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments. I would love to hear what you have to say about this episode in particular and all of the other episodes that I've reviewed. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.